They say home is where the heart is. But what happens when the people you call family decide their hearts no longer have room for you? On my 25th birthday, I woke up to the sound of laughter downstairs. For a moment I thought maybe, just maybe, my parents had remembered me. Maybe they had finally planned something for me. But when I walked into the living room, my heart shattered. Boxes, suitcases, and a for sale sign leaning against the wall. "This isn't your home anymore," my mother said coldly. "We need the money for Belle's future. She deserves it. You'll manage somehow." Well, my younger sister, the golden child, the one who had always been everything I wasn't. As I stood there, watching my family pack away my childhood, my memories, my life, I realized something. They hadn't just taken away my home, they had erased me. And that was the moment I decided, if they thought I was disposable, they were about to learn the truth. I should probably start from the beginning so you can understand how we even got here. My name is Allison. I was the firstborn, the eldest daughter of a middle-class family living in a quiet neighborhood. For years, I thought I had everything a child could want. A warm home, 2 parents who tucked me into bed at night, and a baby sister I swore to protect with all my heart. But as Belle grew older, something shifted. First, it was little things. When Belle got a new doll, I was told to share mine. When she wanted the last piece of cake, I was expected to give it up without question. "You're the older one, Allison," Mom would say. "You should know better." And I believed it. I thought sacrifice was love. But slowly, those small sacrifices became my entire life. Birthdays. Belle's were grand. Balloons, cakes, neighbors invited, gifts stacked high. Mine. A candle on a store-bought muffin if I was lucky. Achievements. If I brought home a good grade, it was brushed aside. If Belle even lifted a pencil, it was genius. Still, I told myself, it's fine. She's the younger one. Maybe they just want her to feel special. But by the time we were teenagers, it wasn't maybe anymore. It was clear. Belle was the sun, and I was just her shadow. One memory stands out so vividly it still burns. I was 17, applying to colleges. I worked so hard on my essay, poured my heart into it. When I showed it to my mom, hoping she'd say she was proud, she barely glanced at it. Instead, she said, "Don't get your hopes up too high, Allison. We'll probably need most of our savings for Belle's future. You're resourceful. You'll figure something out." That was the first time I realized love in my family wasn't unconditional. It was selective, conditional, and I wasn't the chosen one. By the time Belle turned 20 and I was 23, she had everything I didn't. A car my parents paid for, tuition fully covered, trips abroad, and me. I was working 2 part-time jobs just to pay for community college. And then came my 25th birthday. I had spent the night before alone in my tiny room upstairs, trying to convince myself that maybe this year would be different. Maybe they'd remember me. Maybe they'd surprise me with a small cake, or even just a "Happy birthday, Allison." But the laughter I heard that morning wasn't for me. When I walked downstairs, the sight hit me like a punch. My parents and Belle were packing everything into boxes. Photo frames, dishes, even the old rug I used to play on. And then I saw it. The sign leaning casually against the wall. For sale. My chest tightened. What's happening? I asked, my voice trembling. Mom didn't even look guilty. "We're selling the house, Allison. We've already made arrangements. The money will go towards Belle's new condo near the university." My father nodded in agreement, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I felt my throat closing. What about me? Where am I supposed to go? Dad didn't hesitate. "You're an adult. You'll figure it out. We can't hold ourselves back for you anymore. Belle has potential. She deserves this chance." Deserves. That word cut deeper than any knife. And then Belle walked into the room, holding a box of her clothes, smirking. "Don't be so dramatic, Allison. You'll be fine. You've always been the strong one. Besides," she tilted her head, eyes glinting, "you were never really the favorite anyway." The words lodged themselves in my chest like shards of glass. That was it. The final confirmation of what I had known deep down my whole life. I wasn't their daughter. Not really. I was just the placeholder, the backup, the one who filled the silence while Belle shined. That night, I sat alone on my bed surrounded by half-packed boxes. My hands shook as I stared at the walls that had once held my posters, my memories, my laughter. Soon they'd belong to strangers. I wanted to scream, beg, to ask, why me? What did I do wrong? But something inside me snapped instead. I realized begging wouldn't change anything. They had already made their choice. And if they thought erasing me would be that easy, they were about to find out. I wasn't going down quietly. Because this wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about me reclaiming everything they'd stolen. My worth, my voice, my story. And I swear they were going to regret ever thinking I was disposable. The morning after my birthday, reality hit me like a cold slap. The boxes weren't just boxes anymore. They were coffins for my memories. Every framed picture, every book, every little piece of my childhood was being tucked away as if it never mattered. I stood in the kitchen doorway watching my mom bubble with excitement, telling Belle how the new condo was closer to her classes, how she'd be able to host her friends there, how she deserved a fresh start. Fresh start. For her. And for me. Nothing but an eviction notice disguised as parental advice. Cleared my throat. So, when exactly do I have to leave? My mom glanced at me like I was a stranger who'd overstayed her welcome. By the end of the week, we already signed the papers. The new owners are moving in on Monday. The end of the week. Just like that, I was homeless. I looked at my dad, silently begging him to say something different, something human. But he avoided my eyes, sipping his coffee like this was just another morning. Belle, of course, couldn't resist. She smirked as she buttered her toast. Don't worry, Allison. Maybe you can rent a room in the basement of someone's house. You're good at being out of sight anyway. Her words burned, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Fine, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. If that's how it is, I'll figure it out. But inside I was crumbling. The next few days were torture. Everywhere I looked, I saw pieces of myself being erased. The family photo from my 5th birthday, gone. The piano I used to practice on, sold. Even my trophies from school competitions had been shoved into a cardboard box, left in the garage like trash. Meanwhile, Belle paraded around like a queen. She tried on outfits for her new life, posting pictures on Instagram with captions like, "Can't wait to move into my condo, sparkling heart, #blessed." And every time I saw my parents liking her posts, my heart broke a little more. By Friday, the house no longer felt like mine. I packed my clothes into 2 suitcases, folded my blanket, and sat on the bare mattress of my bed. Felt like a funeral. Only this time I was the one being buried. That night my mom knocked on my door. For a split second, hope flickered in my chest. Maybe she'd come to apologize. Maybe she'd change her mind. But no. She just looked at my bags and said, "Make sure you're ready by morning. The movers will be here at 9. Then she turned and left. No hug. No, "I'll miss you." Nothing. Saturday morning came. The movers were early. They carried out boxes like they were robbing me in broad daylight, but my parents laughed and chatted with them like it was some kind of party. When I dragged my suitcases out the door, Belle stood on the porch sipping iced coffee. "Well," she said, tilting her head, "guess this is it. Good luck out there, sis." But the way she said sis felt like a mockery, not love. I clenched my fists, every muscle in my body screaming to lash out, to tell her everything I'd bottled up for years. But instead I just walked away. Because I knew words wouldn't change her, or them. I made it to the end of the street before I collapsed on the curb, tears streaming down my face. My whole life had been ripped away in 1 week. My family had chosen Belle, as always, and left me with nothing. I checked my phone, scrolling through contacts. Friends. Most of them had drifted away because I was always too busy working, too broke to go out. Extended family. They all adored Belle. For the first time in my life, I truly felt alone. But in that silence, a small voice inside me whispered, "This isn't the end. This is the beginning." I found a cheap hostel that night, barely enough money in my account to cover a week's stay. I sat on the bunk bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, wondering how my life had come to this. And then something snapped inside me. Why was I sitting here crying over people who had never valued me? Why was I begging for scraps of love that were never meant for me? If my parents had chosen Belle, then I would choose myself. I pulled out my old laptop, the one I had bought secondhand after months of saving, and I started typing. Not school essays, not job applications, my story, my pain, every betrayal, every wound, poured out of me like wildfire. First it was just for me, therapy, a way to survive. But then I remembered all the other people out there who had felt invisible in their own families. Forgotten children, overlooked siblings, black sheep. What if my story could speak for them too? That thought became my lifeline. The next morning I marched to the public library. With nothing but Wi-Fi and determination, I researched blogging, storytelling, even how to self-publish. Every word I typed was a brick in the foundation of a new life. One that didn't depend on my parents or Belle, or anyone else who had tried to silence me. Of course, the road wasn't easy. I faced nights of hunger, mornings of doubt. There were times I almost gave up, times I stared at job listings and wondered if I was stupid for even trying. But every time I felt weak, I remembered Belle's smirk, my mother's cold eyes, my father's silence. And I thought, no, I won't let them win. I won't let them erase me. Weeks passed. Slowly my blog started gaining readers. People left comments saying, "This is my story too," or "Thank you for putting into words what I could never say." For the first time I felt seen. Not as Belle's sister. Not as my parents' disappointment. But as me. And little did I know, that was just the beginning. Because life was about to give me the one thing my family never did. Chance. Months passed since the day I walked away from my old life. First, survival was all I cared about. I worked part-time jobs, waitressing, tutoring, even handing out flyers on the street, just to afford food and a roof over my head. But every free moment I had, I poured into my writing. And then, something incredible happened. One morning, I woke up to see my blog traffic explode overnight. A popular influencer had shared my story, calling it raw, honest, and heartbreaking. Suddenly, thousands of strangers were reading my words. My inbox filled with messages. People told me how they too had been abandoned, overlooked, treated as shadows in their own families. They called me brave. They thanked me for giving them hope. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. The more I shared, the more opportunities appeared. A small online magazine offered me a column. Then another site asked if I'd write about resilience and healing. Eventually, a publishing company reached out. They wanted me to write a book. Me, the girl who was once kicked out of her own home. I cried the day I signed that contract. Not because of the money, but because it was proof. Proof that I was more than the forgotten daughter. Proof that my voice had value. Fast forward a year. I stood on a stage, holding a microphone, speaking to an audience at a women's empowerment conference. Rows of faces looked up at me, nodding, some even crying as I told my story. I was the invisible one, I said. The daughter who didn't matter. The sister who was always second best. But here's the truth. When they shut the door on me, I built my own house. And that house was made of strength, courage, and my own voice. The crowd erupted in applause. And for the first time ever, I didn't just believe in myself. I celebrated myself. But life has a funny way of circling back. Because just when I thought I'd left my old family behind, they showed up again. It happened after my book launch. My memoir, The story of being erased by my family, surviving betrayal, and finding my power had just hit the bestseller list. Suddenly, I was invited to podcasts, TV interviews, and even featured in a major newspaper. And then, got a call. It was my father. "Allison," he said, his voice shaky. We saw you on TV. We're proud of you." Proud. The word stung. Where was that pride when I needed it most? Where was that love when I was sleeping in hostels, working double shifts just to eat? I stayed silent, letting him fill the silence. "Your mother, she wants to see you." Well, too. We didn't realize. We never thought. I almost laughed. They hadn't realized. Or they hadn't cared. A week later, curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet them at a cafe. When I walked in, my mom's eyes widened. My sister Belle's perfect smile faltered. "Allison," my mom said, reaching for my hand. "You look different." Course I did. I wasn't their doormat anymore. Belle crossed her arms. "So you wrote a book. Congratulations." But I saw the jealousy in her eyes, the cracks in her confidence. For once, I was the one people admired. I sat down, calm and steady. My mom cleared her throat. "We made mistakes. We should have treated you better. We see that now." Her words were careful, like someone choosing the right apology to unlock a door. But the thing is, my door had already closed. I smiled politely. "Thank you for saying that. But I don't need your approval anymore. I'm not here to fix the past. I'm here to move forward." Belle scoffed, but my dad looked down, ashamed. For the first time in my life, I saw guilt in their eyes. And you know what? It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Felt freeing. I left that cafe with my head high. Not because my family finally noticed me, but because I no longer needed them to. They had sold our house for Belle. But I had built something they could never sell. My independence, my voice, my future. Today, I live in an apartment I paid for myself. My book has helped thousands of readers, and I'm working on my second one. I travel, I speak, I share my story, not as a victim but as a survivor. And every time I walk on stage, I remember the girl who once sat on the curb with tears in her eyes, feeling like she had no one. I want to tell her, "Look at you now. You made it." To anyone watching this who feels invisible, unwanted, forgotten, listen to me. You are not defined by how others treat you. You are not limited by the love you didn't receive. You can rise. You can rebuild. You can create a life so powerful that even those who doubted you will have no choice but to watch. I am living proof. Because once upon a time, my parents sold our house for my sister. But in the end, I built an empire of my own. And no one, not my mother, not my father, not even Belle, can ever take that away from me.